Thomas Whitaker was standing in his kitchen arguing with his daughter on the phone when I walked in carrying the casserole dish he'd left at my house 3 days earlier. "No, Anna, I am not sitting at a table by myself." He looked at me and rolled his eyes. I set the dish on the counter. "Then bring someone," his daughter said loudly enough that I could hear her. "My friend canceled." "Dad, please don't spend the entire reception pretending the shrimp table is your date." I laughed. Thomas looked offended. Then Anna said something else I couldn't hear, and he went quiet. A few seconds later, he ended the call. "What?" I asked. Thomas leaned against the counter. "Come with me." "Where?" "To the wedding." I stared at him. His daughter Anna was getting married the following weekend at a historic waterfront hotel outside Charleston. I knew about it because Thomas and I had been neighbors for 4 years, and at some point during those 4 years, we'd become the kind of friends who knew far too much about each other's schedules. We had keys to each other's houses. We shared dinners. We went to concerts when neither of us wanted to go alone. He called me when his kitchen sink made a noise he didn't trust. I called him when I needed somebody to tell me whether a contractor was lying. But we had never dated. Not once. "You want me to be your wedding date?" "Yes." "Thomas, people are going to think we're together." "They already think we're together." "That's because people are nosy." "So?" I should have said no. Instead, I said, "Fine." His smile came too quickly. That should have warned me. A few days later, he showed up at my house carrying 2 jackets. I run a small event floral business, which apparently qualifies me to judge men's formal wear. Thomas tried on the navy one first. "Too much?" "Turn around." He did. I stepped closer and fixed the back of his collar. It was the kind of thing I had done before. Except this time, when I looked up, Thomas was watching me. Not casually, not like a neighbor. For half a second, neither of us moved. Then I stepped back. "You clean up disturbingly well." He smiled. "So do you." I pretended I didn't hear the difference in his voice. That was something I had become very good at over the years. My marriage ended when I was 49. Not because of one catastrophe, because everything became a negotiation. What did this mean? Where was this going? Why hadn't you done this? Why did you expect that? By the end, I had become suspicious of relationships that required constant definitions. Thomas was easy. I liked easy. I had no intention of ruining that. The wedding weekend began with a welcome dinner at the hotel. I wore a deep blue dress I had almost returned because it made me feel a little too noticeable. Thomas looked at me when I came downstairs and forgot what he was saying. That was satisfying. At dinner, Anna's future mother-in-law smiled at me. "And how long have you two been together?" I opened my mouth. Thomas spoke first. "Claire's my partner." I turned slowly toward him. Partner? He knew exactly what he'd done. I could see it on his face. And before I tell you what happened after that, if you're enjoying this confession, tap the like button and tell me where you're watching from tonight. Your city, your state, or your country. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, back to Thomas. I waited until we were alone near the elevators. "You're what?" He rubbed the back of his neck. I panicked. "You panicked into a relationship?" "Apparently." "You could have said friend." "I know." "Then why didn't you?" Thomas looked at me for a moment. "Friend didn't sound right." That landed harder than I expected. He must have seen something in my face because he immediately added, "I can correct it." I should have told him to. Instead, I said, "Don't." His eyebrows lifted. "Don't? It'll make it more awkward." That was my excuse. I knew it was weak. The next morning, Anna hugged me like we'd known each other for years. "I feel like I already know you," she said. "Why?" "Dad talks about you constantly." I looked across the room at Thomas. He was helping one of the groomsmen fix a tie. "Constantly?" Anna smiled. "You're Claire, who hates cilantro. Claire, who nearly fired a client over fake orchids. Claire, who made him buy better porch furniture." "I did not make him." Anna gave me a look. Then Thomas's ex-wife, Elaine, introduced herself. I had expected discomfort. Instead, Elaine was warm, elegant, and completely uninterested in behaving like a jealous former wife. Later, when Thomas had stepped away, she said quietly, "You're the first woman he's brought anywhere since our divorce." I looked at her. "We're friends." Elaine smiled in a way I didn't appreciate. "I'm sure." And hearing that made me wonder how many relationships begin that way. Not with some grand romantic moment, but with two people slowly becoming important to each other before either of them is brave enough to name it. That idea is at the heart of my book, Confession of Unexpected Love. It's a collection of mature romance stories about people who weren't looking for another chance at love, but found themselves facing one anyway. If you enjoy stories like Claire and Thomas's, you'll find the book through the link below in the comments. Now, let me tell you what happened at the wedding. On the wedding morning, one of the ceremony arrangements collapsed after a delivery cart clipped the stand. Anna looked close to tears. That was my territory. Within 20 minutes, I had taken apart 2 arrangements, redistributed the flowers, and rebuilt the damaged piece so nobody would ever know. Thomas watched me from the doorway. Later, when things had settled, he said, "You're very good at that." At bossing people around? At knowing what belongs where? I laughed, but he didn't. That was the problem. Everything he said that weekend seemed to mean 2 things. Then I watched him walk Anna down the aisle. Thomas was never an overly emotional man. He didn't make speeches about his feelings, but when his daughter squeezed his arm before they started down the aisle, he bent his head toward hers and closed his eyes for a second. That moment changed something for me. I had known he was attractive. At 64, he was tall, silver-haired, broad-shouldered, and still carried himself like the architect who had spent 40 years walking onto construction sites expecting people to listen. But seeing him with Anna made him attractive in a different way. Softer, more dangerous. At the reception, Thomas found me after dinner. "Dance with me. You're becoming demanding. I introduced you as my partner. I have a reputation to maintain." I laughed and let him lead me onto the floor. We had never danced together before. That seemed strange considering how much of our lives overlapped. His hand settled at my waist. Mine rested on his shoulder. And suddenly I became very aware that Thomas was not simply my neighbor. He looked down at me. "This is starting to feel less fake than I planned." "You planned?" Poor choice of word. I smiled, but I didn't step away. Neither did he. Later, after most of the speeches were over, I found him on a quiet balcony overlooking the harbor. He was staring at the water. "I still owe you an apology," he said. "For what?" "The partner thing." I leaned against the railing beside him. "Did you mean it?" Thomas went still. He took too long to answer. Not long enough to mean no, long enough to mean it mattered. And for once in my life, I didn't wait for the safer explanation. I turned toward him and kissed him. Thomas froze for about half a second. Then one hand came gently to my waist, and he kissed me back. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't young. It was better than that. It felt like 4 years of small choices finally admitting what they had been. When I pulled away, Thomas looked at me. Well, don't. I didn't say anything. You were going to. I was going to say I'm glad you did that. That should have been the easy ending. It wasn't. Later that night, I walked past Anna and Thomas near the ballroom doors. Anna hugged him and said, "I'm just glad you finally moved on." I kept walking, but the words followed me. Moved on. Suddenly I wondered whether the entire weekend had been about Elaine. Maybe Thomas had wanted someone beside him because his ex-wife had a partner. Maybe I had been convenient. At breakfast the next morning, I asked him directly, "Did you bring me because Elaine would be here?" Thomas frowned. "No, not even a little?" He thought before answering, which annoyed me until I realized he was trying not to lie. Seeing Elaine happy probably made me think about my own life. There it was. I looked away. "But that isn't why I asked you." "Then why?" Thomas leaned forward. "Because when I pictured this weekend, you were the person I wanted beside me." I looked at him. "Then why did it take a wedding for you to say any of this?" For once, he had no joke ready. "Because being your friend was safer than finding out you didn't want anything else." That stopped me. Because it was exactly what I had been doing. I had spent years telling myself our friendship was simple because neither of us demanded anything from it. But I checked whether his porch light was on when I came home late. I saved him a seat without thinking. When something ridiculous happened, he was usually the first person I called. Maybe we had been defining the relationship all along. We just hadn't used the words. When we returned to Charleston, neither of us declared anything. No grand speech, no sudden decision that we were now officially a couple. For 3 days, we returned to our separate houses, and our usual routine vanished. No dinner together, no random texts, no Thomas walking through my back door to return something he had borrowed. I almost called him twice. I didn't. Not because I wanted him to chase me, because I finally understood that whatever happened next had to happen without the wedding giving us an excuse. On Thursday evening, Thomas knocked on my front door. He had a strange expression. Nervous, almost. "Would you have dinner with me Friday?" I smiled. "We have dinner all the time. Not like this." I studied him. "Then ask me properly." Thomas straightened. "Claire Morgan, would you go on a date with me Friday night?" For years, my instinct had been to protect what worked. Don't ask too much. Don't name it. Don't risk changing it. But ambiguity was a choice too. And suddenly it felt like the riskier one. "Yes," I said. Thomas smiled. Friday night became our first real date, which was ridiculous, considering he'd already had a key to my house for 3 years. "And before you go, tell me something. If you had a friendship this close with someone you secretly wanted, would you risk changing it for the chance at something more? Or would you protect the friendship and never say a word?" Maybe that's what made Thomas and Claire's story stay with me. They weren't searching for love. They already had something good. The risk came when they realized that what they had might actually be worth asking for more. And that is exactly the kind of relationship I explore in my book, Confession of Unexpected Love. It's a collection of mature romance stories about friendship becoming something more, unexpected attraction, second chances, difficult choices, and those moments when love appears in a life that already felt settled. If you enjoyed Claire and Thomas's story, and you'd like to spend more time with characters discovering love in places they never expected to find it, you'll find Confession of Unexpected Love through the link below in the comments. And before you go, tell me this. If you were Claire, would you have risked a 4-year friendship for the possibility of something more? Or would you have kept things exactly as they were? Tell me in the comments. And if these mature romance confessions are your kind of stories, subscribe so you'll be here for the next one. If you enjoy mature romance stories about unexpected attraction, second chances, and the complicated choices people make later in life, subscribe so you don't miss the next confession. Sometimes the person you're afraid of losing is already the person you've been choosing all along.